The following story has been brought to you by StoriesToInspire.org.
There was a war in Eretz Yisrael. It was called the 6-Day War. It was a special miracle. That war was full of miracles because Eretz Yisrael was so scared before the war broke out, so scared that really the armies, the Arabs that were going to come attack, were going to really win. It was a very scary time. So many Arab armies were attacking, so many countries were coming to attack one country. It was a very scary time. And that year, Lag BaOmer fell out during the 6-Day War, and very few people came up to Meron for Lag BaOmer. And this story happened that Lag BaOmer, when Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Bender was a big tzaddik, was davening. He was one of the few people in Meron that year, and he was sitting in the kever of Shimon Bar Yochai, and suddenly there's this old lady who comes, Sephardic lady, and she comes into the men's side. There were, like I said, very few people, and she came in and she said to him, Kvod Rav, honored Rabbi, I have to tell you something that just happened to me. And he said, okay, by all means, tell me what's going on, what's on your mind. So she said to him, I have a son in the army. Right now, my son is in the army fighting against the Arabs. And I'm very, very scared. I'm so nervous about him all day long. All I can think about is my son and how his life is in danger as he fights the enemy. And I hope that he's going to be fine and be safe and that he's going to come back to me without any injuries. And I daven all the time, but I'm so nervous that my son is not going to make it. So tonight, I'm in the kever of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai on Lag BaOmer on a day that usually there's so many people here, but this year for the first time, and who knows how long, barely anybody came. And I was davening for hours for my son, davening and crying and davening and begging at Kadosh Baruch Hu that there's a chus of the Heilige Tana, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, my son should be safe in the war. And finally, you know, if you cry for a long time, and if you daven for a long time, you could become tired. And so she became tired. She said to Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Bender, I became tired. And I suddenly felt myself drifting off to sleep there in the kever of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. And I had a dream. And in my dream, she said, I saw a big man. Now we know that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's son, Rabbi Elazar, was a big man. He was very big. And in my dream, she said, I saw a big man. And he comes over to me and he says to me, why are you screaming so much over here? I can't sleep. You're disturbing my rest. And I said to him, I'm very sorry. I didn't mean to disturb your rest. But the reason why I'm screaming and the reason why I'm crying is because I'm very scared. I'm scared for my son. I don't know what's going to happen to him. He went to the army and he's fighting right now the war. And I don't know what's going to happen to him. So I'm very, very scared. And that's why I'm crying, because I'm begging Kadosh Baruch Hu, he should protect my son. He should come back to me healthy and whole. And the big man looked at me and he said to me, don't worry. Your son is going to come back to you. He's going to be okay. And don't worry, because the war is going to be over very quickly. And I said to him, how do you know? He said, because my father is very upset at the Arabs right now. Because of them, nobody's coming to his kever this Lag BaOmer. And he's going to make sure that this war is over very quickly. So don't you worry. Your son is going to come back. Before you know it, he's going to be back. And he'll be just fine. She said, and then I woke up. I woke up and I had to tell you this unbelievable story because, wow, it's incredible how the son of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai came to me to tell me that everything's going to be okay. Why? Because his father, Reb Shimon, is so angry at the Arabs. Because of them, nobody comes to his kever. Because Reb Shimon Bar Yochai loves it when everybody comes to daven and to sing and to dance at his kever every Lag BaOmer. So this is an indication to all of you how important it is to come, and how important Rav Shimon Bar Yochai looks at every single person comes. And I know people who came to the kever of Shimon Bar Yochai. They came themselves, and they didn't have children, and they davened at the kever, and they said to Rabbi Shimon that if they have a son, they are going to name him Shimon after Shimon Bar Yochai. And within the year, These people were blessed with a son who they called Shimon. I know them personally. I want to tell you one other story. You're going to love this story. You can tell it to your Rebbe. And I heard this from the person that it happened to. And he told me, one of my Rosh Yeshivas called me up after Lag BaOmer, this is going back about 15 years ago. And he said, you have to hear my Talmud, you have to speak to my Talmud, because my Talmud just had a story in Meron on Lag BaOmer. So I went to speak to the Talmud. I went to see him, and I said, and he's a regular guy, a regular bacher, Shiva bacher, and he says to me, I want you to know, don't think I'm an Epes Choshva guy, I'm a regular bacher, and this is what the story happened to me. What's the story? So he says to me like this, my sister was expecting her second kid, and the first kid, it was very, very challenging, very difficult birth, and now is the second kid, and the doctors were warning her that it wasn't simple, and we were very scared what's going to happen. And I was davening for her all the time. Every day I was davening for my sister with all my heart, with all my strength, that she should have an easy birth, and that all the complications should disappear. And then we went up to Meron on Lag BaOmer, and that was the day that my sister was scheduled to go into the hospital for surgery. We got to Meron, and my Rosh Yeshiva took us through the crush, and he said, what did I want to do? I wanted to go into the kever because I wanted to daven and say Tehillim for my sister. I know she's going into surgery. But the Rosh Yeshiva said everyone should come upstairs to the top of the roof, and there's going to be a hadlaka from one of the Rebbes, and he wanted us to see it. So I went up, but the whole time, all I wanted was to go down to the kever and daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Finally, the hadlaka was over, and I went down the staircase, and I went into the kever, and you have to understand, there were like so many people, it was crushed. I couldn't get in. I was like trying to battle my way in through all the people, pushing people aside with their cheretz, of course, but I have to get in. I'm trying to get in, and finally, at 9 o'clock, I got into the kever of Shimon Bar Yochai, and I made my way over to the actual kever, and I opened my Tehillim at 9 o'clock, and I started to daven, and I started to cry, and the tears are coming down out of my eyes, they're dripping down my cheeks onto my Tehillim, and I'm davening like I never davened before. Like I feel like my neshama is just jumping out of me and flying, and I'm screaming to Rabbi Shalom to help my sister. It should be a healthy birth. And I davened for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and my tears, he said, I cried so much that suddenly the tears dripped onto the page of Tehillim, and the page was so wet that it started to rip. That's how much I cried. He said, I could show you the Tehillim. The page was ripping from the tears. And when I finished at 9:25, I felt like I had broken through the wall and that everything was going to be okay. And I finally got out at 9:30. And when I got out of the kever of Shimon Bar Yochai, suddenly my phone rings, and it's my mother calling me from America. And she says to me, Mazel Tov, your sister just had a baby. Everything's fine. The baby's okay. Your sister's okay. I said, "What? Tell me what happened." So she said, "I'll tell you. At 1 o'clock, she was supposed to go in for surgery, but the doctor decided to push it off for an hour. And I made a cheshbon. Wait a second. For an hour at 9, I went into the kever 9 o'clock. When is that? 2 o'clock in America. So that means when my Rosh Hashiva made me go up to the roof, so the doctor pushed it off. He pushed it off how long exactly for me to go back? It took the time for me to go down from the roof to go into the kever. Surgery started at 2 o'clock in America, exactly when I started to daven, he says. And you know what happened? There were complications. And the complications were happening at exactly the same time that I was pouring out my heart. I was crying, I was screaming, and the complications, and you know, Baruch Hashem, she says, at 2:25, 2:24, the baby was born. And we were so happy. It's unbelievable. The baby was born, everyone's healthy. Your sister is healthy, the baby's healthy. It's incredible, it was a miracle. But then, suddenly the baby didn't breathe. And we didn't know what to do, and we start crying all over again. And then suddenly, at 2:25 America time, the baby started to breathe, and everything was fine. And he says to me, it was unbelievable. 9 o'clock, I went into the kever, I start davening. 2 o'clock in America, my sister goes in for surgery. 9:25, I crack through the wall, and my tears are ripping the page of my Tehillim, and 2:25 in America, the baby starts breathing. He says to me, I'm just a regular guy. I'm not a tzaddik. I'm not somebody. All I could tell you was what happened. So that's the power that exists in Meron right now.
Enjoyed this story? Come again. Bring a friend. StoriesToInspire.org